When I brought home friends from school, they would call her Mrs. Byrne, which was due to the fact that when I was 5 years old, she married my stepfather, Herbert M. Byrne, Jr. And my cousins would call her Aunt Nell. But as the years went by, more and more people began to call her just plain Nell. For a while, I tried Mother, but it seemed too formal. There was something phony about it, and I gave it up. But I never called her Nell. But that's what resonates in my mind when I think about her. What to call her was not really a problem for too long, because it got to the point where when I was still a teenager, it was normal for me not to call her at all because she couldn't hear me. If I wanted to say something to her, she had to be looking at me, since more than 50% of her comprehension was a matter of reading lips. It was futile, therefore, to try and get her attention by calling her name without visual contact. I had to touch her on the arm or wave to her until she saw me. Now, she had a hearing aid, and it is only now, as I share with her the genetic malady of deafness, that I'm able to afford her the respect and that she deserved for having to deal with that primitive contraption. In the 1940s, a hearing aid consisted of 3 parts. One part was 2 batteries. One was like a flashlight battery, the other was like as large as a piece of soap. And this unit, she strapped on the outside of her upper thigh. And from that unit, there ran a wire up to in between her breast, which was where she placed a transmitter between her 2 breasts and her bra. And then from that, a wire ran up over her breast and under her arm and back up her neck to a little hearing piece. Now, it wasn't that we lacked the technological ability. But remember, World War II years, #1 priority for the scientists, for the technological geniuses, was to invent a more effective weapon that could kill more people more effectively. So a little thing like a hearing aid had to wait until that priority was out. Back then, I was not able to empathize with her over the frustration I now know she felt as she coped with her deafness, especially when she tried to wrangle that apparatus of a hearing aid. At the time, I felt I was the victim, a youth constantly thwarted in his attempt to communicate with his mother. In retrospect, however, it is clear that she was the one dealing with formidable demons, not least among the chief malefactor being that electronic contrivance. The device had an unpredictable personality of its own and was especially prone to assert itself at inconvenient times. Imagine the solemnity of a church where silence is not only appropriate but mandatory. It was a service for the baptism of her grandson, and all the friends and family were gathered around the baptismal font. And just as the pastor was doing his second dab of water on the infant's head, and of the son, there was an ear-piercing squeak that seethed into a high-pitched whistling sound. The minister convulsively jerked his hand back from the baby's head for fear of God only knows what. Fortunately, I knew from experience the source of the sound. I discreetly tapped Nell on the arm to get her attention, and covertly as possible pointed to my breast while with my lips I made a whistling sound. Of course, she understood immediately. It would have been impossible for her not to interpret my charade for anything but the message it conveyed. And with a convincing, casual gesture, and as though scratching with a thumb, turned the volume down. Or, I can remember more than once. That I had to put my face between her breasts about 2 inches from the transmitter, and I would ask, "Can you hear me now?" Her response was to assume a stern countenance of indignation and push me back. "Of course I can hear you. You think I'm deaf?" Deafness was an anathema to her, a bane never fully accepted. Although the batteries, the lives of which were so ephemeral, were a constant challenge and made it difficult for her to evade the reality of her affliction. With a certain regularity, she would put her hand up like a traffic cop and halt me in the middle of a sentence. "Stop, Billy, I gotta change the damn battery." Eventually, she became stone deaf, and the hearing aid ceased to be a handicap or a help. However, as deaf as my mother became, it is important to understand that my grandmother, Mama, was deafer. That's right, even more deaf than Nell. On the other hand, however, Mama was more skilled at reading lips, probably due to the fact that she accepted the severity of her handicap and did what she could to deal with it, while it is doubtful that Nell ever acknowledged her deafness as fact. Mama taught her children and her grandchildren, with the exception of my mother, a two-handed alphabet, the origin of which has remained a mystery to me for more than 70 years. I've sought in vain to find someone among the deaf and even among sign language teachers who knows Mama's version of the alphabet. What a sweet thought, though, to think she made it up. And how ironic that Nell, the one child who finally joined Mama in her consummate state of deafness, refused to learn. But while I was still a teenager, my mother had a few years before the impairment became absolute. And as long as there remained a vestige of oral capacity, she was adamant in denying the reality of her condition. When I was 16 years old, she took me to the restaurant in the Francis Marion Hotel to have lobster for the first time in my life. She had informed me that the Francis Marion was a swanky hotel. She had a way of saying swanky that connoted an upper tier of society. Although I've never understood the concept completely, but then I never migrated from Bamberg, South Carolina to Charleston. She had informed me, I did sense that the scrumptious lobster dinner, which I ordered with her guidance, represented a new level of sophistication. It made me nervous to think that I was taking a preparatory step in attaining some higher echelon of society, which I strongly suspect and am now convinced was Nell's dream for me. So in the ambience of this deluxe restaurant, and it was swanky with its linen tablecloths and silverware all lined up and formally attired waiters, and we were both acting out our roles in a worldly wise fashion. At one point I said, in what I hoped was a cultured manner, "This is different than anything I've ever tasted." I watched her countenance take an expression of suspicion, as though I were putting her on. She looked at me. "It tastes like string?" No, I hastened to clarify what I was saying by exaggerating. "I've never tasted anything like..." I watched her countenance take on an expression of suspicion. "Something basted? What do you mean?" You see, low batteries could, and often did, result in a grotesquely creative distortion, a severe discrepancy between what was said and what she thought she heard. I was frantic, desperate to prevent the dissipation of our aura of sophistication. Therefore, determined to make her understand me, I began to use Mama's alphabet. Before I had finished signing the second letter of the first word, Nell whispered viciously, "Stop that, Billy! You want people to think I'm deaf!" And there were times the situation could be serious, even dangerous. My mother Nell took Mama and my girlfriend Laura and me on a vacation to see my Uncle Bubba, who owned a construction company and was building a water and sewage disposal plant in Clearwater, Florida. Laura was 15, I was 16, and we got married the next year and kept the secret from Nell, even Nell from Nell, for 2 years. But that's another story. One day while we were on that vacation in Clearwater, Nell was driving us somewhere in our 1947 DeSoto. She was so proud of that car and loved to boast about its fluid drive, an innovative idea for an early version of the automatic transmission. The only problem with it was that the damn car would stall at inopportune times. And this particular day, when Nell's fashionable DeSoto decided to stall, it happened to be on a railroad track. Unbelievable, but frightfully true. We were stalled squarely on a railroad crossing. Moreover, a train was coming at apocalyptic speed, one of those times more dramatic than fiction. I was in the back seat with Mama, and Laura was in the front seat with Nell, trying frantically to tell her a train was coming. And though ominously close, Nell was impervious to the vehement blasting of the whistle that was screaming like a banshee for us to get the hell out of the way, the sound blossoming into a special effect of a huge specter. But Nell, who didn't see the train and couldn't hear it, was in no particular hurry to start the car because she was trying to hear what Laura was saying. "What did you say?" And seeing the frantic expression on her face, "Well, what's wrong, Laura?" Mama, and the security of her oblivion in the back seat, was only curious. "Why, Nell, are we parking here?" Nell finally got the car started but did not drive forward. Instead, she was responding to Laura's frenetic attempt to make her understand that a train was coming. "Now, Laura, what is it? What is wrong?" In less than 2 minutes, we were going to make the front page of the Clearwater News as 4 victims of an utterly demolished DeSoto. I tapped Nell firmly on the shoulder. She looked back at me, and I gestured in a deliberately calm and very serious manner for her to go forward, which she did, though still not seeing the train and in no particular hurry. In a matter of just less than 2 minutes, with the DeSoto not more than 10 feet from the track, the train roared by, shaking the car so violently that we were wrapped in a communal blanket of ferocious vibrations. Turning and seeing the train, Nell realized what had happened. "Good Lord, we could have been killed. We almost were." Meanwhile, Mama, who had not yet seen the train, responded to the vibration. "Oh, my Jimmy cats, I think a rabbit just ran over my grave." You see, "Oh, my Jimmy cats" was a standard saying for her. Whenever she passed gas inadvertently, she would say, "Oh, my Jimmy cats, somebody mashed a frog." Nell parked on the side of the road while we all shared a few minutes of post-traumatic shock. It had been a fearfully close call, barely escaping mortality's final embrace. It was as close as I had ever come to my own death. And we were saved by what? Luck, fate, the omnipotent hand of benevolence? Mama broke the silence. "Well, now, if you can't find the store, why don't you just ask someone? I would really like my ice cream." Then Nell exploded with her signature laugh and accused Laura. "My goodness, Laura, why didn't you tell me the train was coming?" And that was the beauty of my mother. She was able to see the humor in all of our foibles. She could laugh at herself, make jokes about her batteries, and having to speak to her chest when the transmitter was located. There are no memories more precious to me than when she was able to see the humor in serious situations and laugh in the face of adversity. And I would be so grateful to think that I might have inherited enough of her special quality to keep me from whining and seeking pity, which, to my knowledge, Nell never did.
Thanks a lot.